I think it's important for people to know why someone like Trump became the president of the United States in the first place. Because without knowing that, you don't know where Trump is going. Things did not start today. It started many, many years ago. You know, Trump is an outsider. He is not from the usual path, congressman, senator, governor. He just came in straight from the outside when he was first elected in 2016. And even this time around, he's actually a convicted criminal. For someone like to be elected president, the establishment must have done something really bad. Because Americans don't vote for someone like that easily. Which means that unless there was a really good reason to vote, Trump would have never become the president. And I would argue that it's the failure of both the Democrats and Republicans over this long period of time that produced a situation where someone like Trump could get elected. And the most important of that is, as you mentioned, it's that the establishment allowed U.S. trade deficit to continue for over 40 years and did nothing about it. Most countries do not allow that to happen because if you're worried about economic growth, we're talking about GDP growth. If the trade deficit is growing, your GDP is going down. If your trade surplus is increasing, of course your GDP goes up. US allowed trade deficit to continue for so long, and the result is that the amount of GDP Americans lost as a result of this 40-some years of trade deficit is something like 153% of GDP. If you convert that into today's dollars, that's 41 trillion US dollars. That's no peanuts. And this amount was shouldered or borne not by Americans equally, but those people who are competing with imports. They are the ones who suffer the 41 trillion. The other people, if you're in academia, if you're in finance, if you're in service industries, you don't suffer this. You actually sometimes benefit because you can buy cheaper goods from China, Taiwan, Japan, other places. So these people benefit. But those people who lost, you may call the losers of free trade, began to grow when the trade deficit grows. At the very beginning, 40 years ago, this group was probably very small. And so US was a leader in free trade. And we all learned to love Americans who are leader of free trade because they are willing to buy so much of our stuff. But 40 years later, with continuous running of this deficit, the number of people who consider themselves losers of trade continued to increase. And by 2016, this group was large enough to elect Trump president. That should have taught Democrats a lesson. Says, oh my gosh, trade deficit is that important. So many unhappy people in the so-called mid-America, Midwest. That should have been a lesson for Kamala Harris and the Democratic candidate this time around to make sure that they have a policy for these people suffering. But if you look at what happened during the campaign from middle of last summer all the way to November, Kamala Harris did not mention even once what she will do about these people. I was so worried that this will lead to a big Trump victory. I called Democratic friends that, you're crazy, not addressing these people. But they didn't think that was important. Of course, we know what happened. And so I don't think this is an election where Trump won. It's an election where the establishment lost. These two are different. Now, what that means is that Trump will not give up these protectionist ideas unless something so much better is offered to him. The whole Trump phenomenon started because he's talked about protectionism. All the other candidates in the previous 40 years never talked about protectionism, only Trump. At the beginning, when Trump announced his candidacy back in 2015, everybody laughed at him. What is this real estate developer coming and trying to become US president? Totally out of question. But when you start talking about protectionism and saving American industries, suddenly millions of people start supporting Trump. And that was a huge shock to Hillary Clinton, because she thought these blue-collar workers are supposed to vote for Democrats, not the Republican like Trump, and a billionaire too. But she realized that this phenomenon is real. So even Hillary switched sides, right? She was originally for TPP, herself negotiated TPP as the most advanced free trade agreement in history. But in the middle of her campaign, she suddenly drops the TPP, if you remember. And she starts talking about protectionism. That's how big an impact Trump campaign had on the US society. So both Democrats and Republicans moved toward protectionism. But of course, Trump won. It was too late for her to switch sides. For Trump, protectionism is the core of his support base. If he didn't mention protectionism, he won't be here today. That means he won't give up this easily. Even if people around him said this may be very damaging, he will not let it go. So this is something we have to start with. When Taiwan or Japan or other countries start thinking about how to deal with Trump, this is the beginning. This is what you have to realize, that the American government, Democrats and Republicans, should have lowered the exchange rate, for example, so that the people will not be so unhappy in Midwest. But the American government didn't do it. Republicans, Democrats let the dollar remain very strong. But even though it was their mistake, American mistake, Taiwan, Japan, China, we all benefited from that mistake hugely. So when they realized that that was a mistake, and they tried to move it to where that is better politically, the people who benefited, who enjoy the party, suddenly realized that, oh my gosh, the party is over. That's where we are now. So the idea that somehow Trump may get tired of this protectionism and then we're going to return to the world that existed before, I think that's not in the cards. People in this part of the world should not give an impression that if suddenly Trump disappears, everything will go back to normal. It won't go back to normal, because this is a problem that was ignored for 40 years. And it was Trump's genius to discover that there's a big problem. There are many Americans who are unhappy. And $41 trillion was lost from these people. And until the world come up with measures to help these people feel better, I think the whole world will move toward protectionism. And that's not good for the world.